Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm gonna be testing a mini PC. This tiny little thing right here is an entire PC with an Intel Core i9 processor. Is this a good idea? Let's find out. So this is the Geekom Mini IT13 and it features the Intel Core i9-13900H processor, which has 6 performance cores with hyper-threading and 8 efficiency cores. It's very similar to my desktop i5-13600K that I have right there, but of course with a lower TDP. And speaking of lower TDP, well, that's one of the biggest compromises and biggest drawbacks actually of this mini PC. Supposedly with a beefier cooling solution, this CPU can actually run at 45 watts locked, and here with the Mini IT13 it's locked to 35 watts. It's not a major deal, you know, it doesn't really affect performance by all that much, but it's gonna be slightly slower than a 45 watt part, of course. Aside from the i9, this mini PC features 32 gigabytes of DDR4, not 5. Why? And a fast 2TB SSD, so it's pretty well equipped in terms of memory and SSD storage. There's also the possibility of increasing that RAM size to 64 gigabytes if you really need it in dual channel, as well as increasing that storage by adding a 2.5-inch drive. Like, they still managed to have space for a 2.5-inch drive. Like, what the heck, dude? Let's talk about the ports and I/O now, and here the IT13 does not disappoint. On the front you have a couple of USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, one 3.5mm headphone jack and the power button. Switching to the back we find the power connector, a couple of USB 4 ports, which I will use to connect the external GPU a little bit later on in this video. We also find a couple of HDMI 2.0 ports, one 2.5 gigabit LAN port, and two more USB connections. One is 2.0 port and the other one is another 3.2 Gen 2 port like on the front. Now, on its side you can find an SD card slot, and I don't know how they've managed to pack so much I/O into this little thing, dude. It's insane actually, guys. An SD card slot. My 17-inch laptop does not have an SD card slot. But that's enough intro. Let's play some games on this tiny little thing. First with the Intel Xe graphics with 96 execution units that comes inside of the i9-13900H, and then with the external GPU, which will be an RTX 4070 inside of this Razer Core X enclosure. Let's get to it, shall we? Let's start with Counter-Strike 2. We're playing at 720p resolution using the low settings with no FSR. Okay, everybody, it's a very sunny day here in Anubis, and we are on the T side, so the glasses are needed here. Okay, I'm gonna start counting our FPS, and this is one of the most intensive maps, I believe, because it has a ton of water in it. Now, over on the side of the smokes and some fire effects, and over here it's actually doing a pretty decent job, this Xe graphics. I thought it was gonna drop a little bit more from like 60 frames per second, but it's hanging in there. Let's continue here. Can I see some water, by the way? Where is all of that water that's very, very intensive that I was telling you about? What the heck? Oh, there it is. Okay, here we go. Water effect, yes, and smoke effect at the same time. Look at that. Okay, so it's starting to drop a little here. It still hasn't dropped from 60, but it's almost dropping, and there we go with the explosion, with the smoke at the same time, and all of the water around us. It actually does drop from 60 frames per second. So yeah, is Counter-Strike 2 playable on Intel Xe graphics? Yes, it is. Is it a super enjoyable experience? Not really. It's not a competitive one, you know. You'd need like 100 plus frames per second for that. But hey, you can enjoy a few matches here and there at 720p resolution, and you can even get more FPS if you play at like 800 by 600, which it becomes really, really pixelated, but hey, it gives you more FPS. Hello there. What the heck is this guy doing? How didn't he see me? Maybe he was playing at 800 by 600, you know? Alright, in the end, it's a much slower experience than Counter-Strike Go, but it's still okay. Next is Dota 2 at 1080p resolution using the medium settings preset but with 100% resolution scale. Seems like a team fight is just breaking out right here, so let's start counting our FPS, see what kind of performance we get. So far is pretty dang smooth even with all of these effects. It only slightly drops from 60 frames per second into like the lower 50s or high 50s at times. It's pretty stable as well. Looking at the 1% lows, it does not stutter whatsoever, and it is fully GPU bound, as I would expect with an i9 CPU, right? And Intel Xe graphics. If you require a bit more FPS, you always have the low settings. That bumps up the averages to around 100 frames per second, so it could feel a little bit smoother on a high refresh rate monitor. But I mean, I would go for medium settings because in Dota 2 I think it looks pretty good like this. It's a major increase in visuals compared to low settings. Also, those temperatures are pretty high on the CPU. That's to be expected with such a small PC with an i9, right? But yeah, I guess they're safe. Next is Valorant, very easy to run title at 1080p using the low settings with high textures, because, you know, you want that competitive experience once again. Here we go, guys. This is also the first time that I'm playing this map right here, Sunset, it's called. Unfortunately, I'm probably gonna suck a little bit, but I'll do my best. That's not my best, I'm sorry. Okay, let's keep on going. All right, now we're talking. Is it me or is this map super boring? I don't see any people, like, it's a maze, basically. You know what? This map sucks. I'm gonna go to another one. I hate this. Okay, now I'm gonna finish first place, right? Because this map I actually know. Yes? There we go. Oh! Also, the FPS are very, very similar to what we saw in the previous map, which is good to see, at least. That it's very consistent, you know? Very good stuff. Oh! Come on, come on. Spray control, my friend. Spray control, yes. Now, with smoke effects and stuff like that, the FPS might drop a little bit further than what you're seeing here, by the way. But that's normal. It's still gonna be a competitive experience. That's what matters. I guess we're gonna finish second place, my friends, unless I do very impressive things right now. No, that's definitely not gonna happen. Okay, yeah. Damn it. Well, I'll take it, though. It's fine. Almost 200 FPS average. Great experience. It's just my skills are not there at the moment. Next is a AAA title from a while ago. It's GTA 5 at 1080p resolution using the high settings with very high textures. And I initially launched the game on normal settings, which are the lowest settings in this game. And I was getting 60 to 70 frames per second most of the time around this area. So it's possible for you to play at 1080p resolution with 60 FPS, which is awesome and very smooth, of course. But since GTA 5 is a single-player title and it actually looks pretty good on high compared to normal, I chose these settings. It's still a smooth-ish experience. It doesn't really stutter or anything. It plays well with 40 to 50 frames per second most of the time, and I think I myself would play like this on Intel Xe graphics. But this isn't anything that I haven't seen before, you know. When testing the 11320H, an i5 from the 11th generation, with Intel Xe graphics as well, I was getting really similar results what we're seeing right here. Oh, yeah, that was very close to exploding right there. But yeah, that's to say that I think they could have improved Intel Xe graphics a little bit, you know? Like, it's been a couple of years and this iGPU has stood exactly the same. That's not great to see, okay? It's nice to see that it can actually play a few titles, you know? You can have fun with integrated graphics, not for very high-end games, of course, and demanding ones, as we'll see in just a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely gonna provide you with a decent gaming experience in a few games. Goodbye, Bob! It's been a while, but you're dead. There we go. Back to hell you go. Anyway, GTA 5 is done. Let's move on to a more intensive game. And that game is one of the most intensive, or should we say, most broken titles out there. It's Starfield, aka Slowfield. Let's hit play right there, and unfortunately it gives us an error. It just says that the graphics card does not meet the minimum requirements, and well, that's to be expected, but I actually played the game with the GT 1030 already. I mean, it didn't run well whatsoever, but it launched. I wish we could see how it ran with like 3 FPS, but hey, we cannot do that here. Maybe with a GPU upgrade. Alright everyone, and next up we got Forza Horizon 5, and I'm messing things up already. God damn it. Okay, let's go over the settings. This is way easier to run, obviously, than Starfield and stuff like that. And it's a really well-optimized title. We're playing at 1080p using 2x MSAA, which is the default in this game, and it doesn't really impact performance as much as other games. And we're using the low settings preset. And it seems like this is enough to get us 30 plus FPS all of the time, which is okay. It's decent for Forza. It looks a bit rough in the edges, though, not gonna lie, on the low settings, and it still stutters quite a bit, as you can see. Like, that frame time graph is not smooth whatsoever, but if I wasn't really looking at it, I wouldn't say that it's stuttering as much as it actually is. We're also going really fast with this car, so that could be a problem. Over here it's pretty intensive. It's dropping into the lower 30s. Ton of stuttering once again, but hey, let's keep on going. Oh my goodness, that's a big jump right there. Finally, we're approaching the big city where the FPS usually drop the most, and we're seeing the same values as before, like lower 30s. God, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry about this, my friends. Anyway, tunnel area is the most intensive one. It actually does dip into the high 20s there. Alright, so it can get pretty intensive, but that's only gonna happen whenever you are inside of tunnels, which is not very often, unless you really like tunnels. Next up is Stutter Night at 1080p using performance mode, far view distance, high textures, and low meshes. Let's go. Oh boy, while dropping, it's actually in the 30s, guys. Damn, but I've already played an entire match of Fortnite for about like 30 minutes or so, 20 to 30 minutes. And just to preload the shaders so it stutters less the second time around. Still, I think it's gonna stutter like hell, because this was really, really terrible, actually. Anyway, let's keep on going here, guys. Getting like 70 to 80 frames per second in this area. This is more GPU bound than CPU bound here. Over here, we're at 70-ish% usage, though. So that leads me to believe that it is CPU bound, but I don't know. We'll find out with the dedicated GPU, of course. Moving on, if it wasn't for the super annoying stuttering issues that we're seeing every now and again, it would have been a pretty decent experience, because I think it didn't really drop from 60 FPS yet, aside from when we were dropping from the sky, of course. Oh my god, look, oh boy, oh no, what the hell, it actually dropped to 30 FPS there because of the stutters. Jesus, I'm approaching a more CPU bound area in the game, and over in this area, it is actually getting around 60 frames per second. Sometimes it will drop into the 50s, but hey, again, in terms of average performance is okay, but the stutters ruin everything. Now it's Red Dead Redemption 2 at 720p resolution using ultra textures and the lowest settings on everything else. And here we have it, guys. It is super shimmery. Holy crap, really pixelated. It's just because of 720p, guys. I just forgot how 720p looked because I have been testing other games in between of making these clips for its mini PC. Anyway, it's getting pretty playable FPS, actually. I'm gonna go to Strawberry Town, but first we need to see Jack, because I think I forgot to see that bastard, or maybe he ran away from us in GTA 5. Right? I think he also ran away from us in Red Dead Redemption 2. Jack doesn't like this mini PC, apparently. Huh. Finally, Strawberry Town, my friends. A lot of people say that this is the most intensive area in the entire game. It's dropping down into the mid-30s, low 30s even. Okay. So 1080p is probably not an option, because it would drop from 30 FPS for sure at that resolution. 720p is pretty adequate, though. Oh my god, guys. Call of Duty Warzone 2 still hasn't been fixed for Intel Xe graphics. Are you actually serious? Look at this. It still has all of these bugs ever since it released like a year ago almost. Alright, so we're playing this at 720p using XeSS on quality and the minimum settings over here. Pretty much everything is set to the minimum and it won't be playable, guys. Not with these kinds of graphical bugs. Holy crap, dudes. I mean, if you're into like rare stones, ruby, sapphires, and stuff like that, this might be an interesting game to play with Intel Xe graphics. But you know what bothers me the most, guys? It's that the actual FPS are okay. It doesn't look great. It's really soft, obviously, but it doesn't stutter. And it's getting 40-ish frames per second. Now, in a game like Call of Duty, you definitely want 60 plus all of the time, not 30 plus, to stand a chance, you know, and be a little bit competitive at it. But yeah, these are actually playable FPS. Look at this. Zarqwa from above is not dropping from 30 FPS yet. You know what? That's pretty impressive. Over here is the most intensive part of my benchmark runs, and it is not dropping from 30 FPS. That's really surprising performance for integrated graphics. And finally, the last game is Cyberpunk 2077 at 720p. This is the update 2.0, and the lowest settings with XeSS set to quality. Here we have it, and it is actually pretty playable, to my surprise. I mean, those 1% lows look terrible, but I can't really feel any major stuttering issues, honestly, and it's above 30 frames per second, at least so far. This isn't really that intensive, so maybe near Bob it is gonna drop from 30. Oh boy, I'm starting to get scared here, but nope, still good. Still getting 30, okay, 30, flat there. Goodbye, Bob. Oh, he's not dead. It's supposed to be fixed. Goodbye, Bob. And it's supposed to not be Cyberbug anymore, right? Yeah, there we go. That's beautiful physics right there from the update 2.0. What the hell happened, though? 32, 30, still drops to 30, flat. Okay, not too bad, you know? You could actually lock it to 30 FPS and play like this, but you definitely need a very small monitor. And it dips down into the 20s. Oh no, 28. I guess it's playable, but again, the graphics look really terrible and very pixelated. This is only good for like a 7-inch monitor, for example, on a Steam Deck. That would look pretty okay with these graphics. Anything above like 21 inches is gonna look terrible. Alright, so that was the experience with the Intel Xe graphics inside of this little machine. If you run it on its own, it will perform like that. It's okay, you know, some titles, especially lighter titles, will run absolutely fine. Obviously, something like this isn't really meant for gaming primarily, so I will have some productivity results a little bit later in this video, but I really want to take a look at the i9's performance itself, you know, the CPU, even if at 35 watts locked. So what we're gonna do to allow the CPU to stretch its legs a little bit is pair it with the RTX 4070 via the Razer Core X enclosure. And now that we are in the desktop, guys, you can see right there that the PCI Express version is 3.0 times 4. So that's really low. That's just a limitation with Thunderbolt 3, basically, which is what the Razer Core X supports. And well, it's gonna limit the GPU performance by quite a bit, unfortunately. And here we have it, back to Counter-Strike 2, now with the 4070 installed using the high settings preset with 4 times MSAA. And guys, notice that I added the CPU temperature graph because now we are more CPU bound basically in every game, and this tends to spike up a little bit more than it did previously. I sometimes saw up to 100 degrees Celsius, and that can cause a few stutters here and there. Fortunately though, that's not the case in Counter-Strike 2. You can see the CPU temperatures are creeping up there sometimes, spiking at 90, 93 degrees Celsius, but as long as they don't touch 100 degrees Celsius, it won't be a problem and it will be a smooth experience overall. I'm playing a casual match, nice explosion right in front of us at the moment, just to see a few smoke effects and so on, which is very intensive for the GPU to handle usually. and then I'm gonna play a deathmatch to get a feel of the smoothness and the playability, basically. Okay, time to make things intensive. Smoke effects are very, very intensive, of course, as you know in Counter-Strike. I'm also gonna throw a grenade inside of it, which makes it even more intensive, and now the FPS starting to drop into the 130s, 140s. Still very good, obviously. Lastly, the fire grenade or incendiary grenade, whatever, it doesn't really drop too much right here. So let's move on to deathmatch. Also, while in these menus, it actually gets really high temperatures there. Still doesn't touch 100 degrees Celsius for the most part, but that's pretty interesting. All right, here we go. Oh, nice. Okay, double. Come on, come on. Oh, that wasn't me. Smooth experience right here, just how I like it. 1% lows are actually pretty low, probably because I died so much already. Okay, the frame time graph is not a completely flat line, you know, as I like to see, but still, it's perfectly fine and acceptable. Now, you can clearly see that the CPU isn't really maxed out, GPU isn't maxed out either, but that is actually a CPU bottleneck. Because the CPU is running at 35 watts, it's not boosting too high. This game doesn't really utilize all of the threads on the 13900H, and the threads that it's running on are not really too fast. They're at 3 point something gigahertz. So that means that we are completely CPU bound in Counter-Strike 2, and that's going to be the case for many of the titles here today. Still, it's providing a great experience here, and I could definitely play this game, even competitively, with a system like this. Let's go play some Dota 2. Alright, here we go, guys. We're at 1440p using ultra settings, basically. The only setting that's not maxed out is the shadow quality, but this is the preset with 100% resolution scale. I'm gonna start counting the FPS. It seems to be pretty smooth indeed. Alright, let's see some effects, some little fluctuations there in the frame time graph, but nothing major really. It's still pretty smooth, I would say. These effects are actually GPU bound, and of course we are CPU bound the entire time here with the 13900H at those 35 to 40 watts of TDP, of course. Let's see the fight once again. 100 and something frames per second, like lower 100s, but it doesn't really drop from that. So it's always gonna be a very buttery smooth experience. And look at that, we got the same 69 FPS on average as we saw in CS2. Next up is Valorant at 1440p using the high settings with 4 times MSAA, and even with these settings we are fully CPU bound. But the good thing is, guys, that this is actually a really smooth experience. There's no stuttering whatsoever. You can actually enjoy some Valorant and even be competitive at it with a 35 watt i9. Okay. Of course, if it was unlocked, it would get more FPS because it's fully CPU bound at the moment. That's normal for Valorant, but yeah, the more power you give to the CPU, the more FPS you'd get in this game, of course. Oh well, we're actually doing fine here today. No, someone stole my kill. Someone stole my kill. It was you. Okay, got him, but I got backstabbed once again, my friends. Oh boy, no! Oh, not. There was another one from behind helping that bitch. Oh my god, what the hell is that headshot, dude? He was hearing me. That's it. That's it. I'm hearing my own voice, and they are hearing my steps. That's unfair. Oh boy. Okay, there's another one. Nice, 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 nice. Can we get an ace here, guys? Can we get an ace? Of course not. Okay, you know what? We're not gonna finish first place because I am butthurt at the moment. I don't care about this game anymore. Let's move on. Back to GTA 5, this time at 1440p with 4 times MSAA and the max settings aside from post effects, as well as the advanced graphics over here. Alright, let's go see Jack. Oh my god! Damn it, that was a very bad attempt of going to see Jack. What the heck? Anyway, let's keep on going. The FPS seem to be very high and stable above everything else. That's great. GPU utilization is not fully maxed out, so the CPU is reaching its limits a little bit at times, I guess. But most of the time it is GPU bound here. Alright, get out of the way, people. I got a Bob to kill. I mean, a Jack to visit. Yes. Oh, damn. Okay. It's all good. So far, so good. Temperatures of the CPU are also under control. At the beginning, while loading, by the way, they were creeping up into the high 90s as well as touching 100. But now it's back to normal, 80-something degrees Celsius. All right, bushy areas are supposed to be more GPU bound, but that CPU temperature is actually rising here. Hello, Jacqueline. How's it going? Tell Jack that I love him, all right? That's pretty interesting. Like, because the FPS are lower at the moment, I thought the CPU would have to work less, but it's actually working more for some reason, or at least reaching a higher temperature. And it's lower utilization at the same time. That's really weird. Goodbye, Bob! Nice to see you and kill you, my friend. Not friend, my enemy. Yes, my biggest nemesis ever. That's it for GTA. As you can see, it's a pretty solid experience. But you know what's not gonna be a solid experience? You guessed it right. It's Starfield at 1440p high settings, and yeah, it's getting 30 frames per second. It's not maxing out that GPU because it's a CPU bottleneck at this point. And look at those temperatures. Oh my god. Oh, they're rising up. They're rising up a lot. Jesus. Seems like whenever you are using more than like 40% of the CPU, those temperatures are just gonna rise up and keep rising until they hit 100 degrees Celsius, and then it drops down to 80-something degrees Celsius and throttles the CPU a bit. Anyway, let's drop it down to low settings, native resolution here, because this will ease the CPU load a little bit. And now it is getting like 10 more FPS, not even that, 5 more FPS. Okay, so Starfield won't really be playable even with an external GPU with this mini PC right here. I expected a little bit better, not gonna lie. Now it's Forza Horizon 5, and unfortunately I got terrible news in this one. First up, the temperatures are reaching 100 degrees Celsius in the menu. By the way, we're playing at 1440p using the lowest settings in the game. And second, the temperatures inside of the game aren't really as crazy as before, but it is stuttering like crazy. See that? See those little spikes there that happen from time to time? They are exaggerated at higher settings than very low. That's why I dropped it down to this. But it's still not what I'd consider playable. The FPS are very high, yes, but this is all because of the bandwidth limitations of this GPU enclosure, which is Thunderbolt 3. Once again, that's only PCI Express 3.0 times 4, and it's apparently not enough to provide a smooth experience, a stutter-free experience in one of the most well-optimized titles out there. All right, now we're in the city area just to see if it gets even worse over here. I mean, CPU performance is actually there. Even with 35 watts, it's getting 140 FPS average. Now, to be 100% sure that it's just the GPU enclosure's fault here, causing the stuttering, I actually installed it on another mini PC with the Ryzen 9 7940HS, and it was giving me exactly the same experience. But you know what? At least Stutter Night isn't that stuttery anymore with this configuration. We're playing at 1440p using DirectX 12 and the high settings with no nanite enabled and quality DLSS. Alright, and even though we have a CPU bottleneck right here, GPU usage isn't really maxed out, and the CPU usage is actually at around 60%, it's not heating up too much, so it's not making the game stutter at all, actually. Like, this is really smooth. I've already joined the match previously, played for about 5 minutes, and to load in some things, but even in the first run, it wasn't really stuttery whatsoever. I got like a couple of major stutters, but that's completely normal, of course. It's just the shaders loading. This time, with the shaders already loaded, everything is buttery smooth. It works really well here, guys. It's only running at around like 3.3, 3.4 gigahertz most of the time, and that works quite well with Fortnite at 130 FPS average and the 4070. There we go. Nice stuff. And that's awesome to see. Sometimes this mini PC can actually provide a decent experience with an external GPU. It's just very hit and miss. But yeah, overall, this was a really enjoyable experience in Fortnite. I'm impressed. Now it's Red Dead Redemption 2 at 1440p using the favor quality settings preset without motion blur. And at least in the menu, the temperatures are creeping up, my friends. But once we get into the game, they will go back down. So that's all right. It's because of the clock speed. I got it now, okay? The higher the clock speed, the higher the temperatures with this CPU, even though the power usage stays around the same. It's pretty interesting. Anyway, in Red Dead Redemption 2, you can expect a pretty smooth experience overall. Sometimes there are a little bit bigger frame time spikes there, and I think if we lock the FPS, those will be smoothed out. So I'm gonna turn on VSync, which will cap our FPS to 60. And here we have it. Apparently, Jack is not here again, guys. I don't know what happened to that boy here in Red Dead Redemption 2. I've seen him like twice. Anyway, over here it drops down into the 40s and 50s most of the time. And yeah, at least it's a stable experience. Doesn't really have major stuttering issues, you know. It's not super buttery smooth, but I've seen way worse, and I could definitely enjoy this game like this. Now it's Call of Duty Warzone 2 at 1440p using the ultra settings with no DLSS, normal textures, and that's it. And here we have it. We're right around 60 frames per second. That means that it will probably drop here and there. Yep, there we go. It's starting to stutter a little bit as well. I also see some very consistent frame time spikes or little stutters that happen. Like mostly the frame time graph is actually flat, but sometimes there is going to be that little spike every now and again. So that can be very distracting, and especially if you're aiming for a competitive experience, well, you're not going to have it here. It's not as bad as Forza Horizon 5 for sure, and I mean, I could have a little bit of fun right here, but I'm always at a disadvantage, and look at that frame time right here. Like, if I turn around the camera, it's just... it's not good. You know, it doesn't feel great. Let's move on from here and play the next one, Cyberpunk. And I got really bad news, guys. Here we have it, Cyberpunk at 1440p using the low settings. Okay, this is a preset, so some things are still set to medium. But unfortunately, the same thing that happened in Forza Horizon 5 is happening now in Cyberpunk. The external GPU enclosure is not capable of providing the needed bandwidth for this game to run flawlessly without stuttering. So we end up with a truly terrible frame time graph. Jesus. Those physics. This is really sad to see, you know, because once again, on average, it seems like this would have been capable of achieving a playable experience in Cyberpunk, but unfortunately, just because of the connection being Thunderbolt 3 of the external GPU enclosure itself, we get this performance. Again, I also tried this on the other mini PC that I have. It got exactly the same issues, exactly the same results. In Cyberpunk, it doesn't even have any thermal problems here. It doesn't reach 100 degrees Celsius even while loading and menus and stuff. So yeah, it's down to the eGPU enclosure. And yeah, unfortunately, it's very hit and miss, this stuff. So those were the results with the external GPU enclosure, and in most titles we saw a huge gain in performance, of course, but in a couple of them, Forza Horizon 5 and Cyberpunk 2077, you saw that it was pretty terrible. Once again, that's all because of the interface the external GPU is running on, Thunderbolt 3, and it doesn't have the needed bandwidth for those games to run stutter-free. But that's enough gaming tests, guys. Let's move on to productivity, as well as some CPU benchmarks. Okay, first up, let's take a look at Cinebench 2024, and on the multi-core test, we got 648 points on the 13900H, which is pretty good, you know, especially for 35 watts TDP. If it was running at 45 watts, of course, it would have scored a little bit higher, but these are not bad results, especially when you compare it to the Apple M1. It's much faster than this one, and the Intel Core i7 1280p from the last generation. Moving on to single core performance is where this shined a lot. I was really impressed to see 115 points here in Cinebench 2024, and it actually beat all of the CPUs that come preloaded in Cinebench. And the last of the benchmarks is the CPU profile in 3D Mark, and here we got a lot of tests going on. So we got the max threads, 16 threads, 8 threads, 4 threads, 2 threads, and 1 thread. And the scores are on screen for you to take a look at them, of course, if you're interested in that. But what's interesting here is that we can see the CPU clock frequency as well as the CPU temperature and how those things change with the load on the CPU. So we can clearly see that with 1 and 2 threads, the CPU is roughly at around 5 gigahertz most of the time, with some more fluctuations when it's using 2 threads. When we're using 4 threads, it stabilizes at around 4 gigahertz, 8 threads at around 3 gigahertz, and 16 threads as well as max threads, it stabilizes at 2.6 to 2.7 gigahertz. Moving to the temperature graph right now shows us the CPU hitting 100 degrees Celsius very often. First of all, when it's loading the actual benchmark, it's always hitting 100 degrees, and on the single thread test as well as the dual thread test, it's also hitting 100 degrees very often. On the single thread, it's actually throttling a little bit more than the 2 threads for some reason. It's interesting, but yeah, it's dropping the temperatures down to like 70-ish degrees Celsius sometimes. Could be some variation within the test, of course, but yeah. Usually these CPUs, from what I've read online in laptops, in mini PCs and so on, they will always hit the thermal limits of 100 degrees Celsius. So from what I've heard and from what Intel says, it's safe. I mean, I think 100 degrees Celsius is a bit too high, and I don't really feel very comfortable with it. But the fact of the matter is it didn't really hinder our performance. I still wish to have seen a bit better cooling, because 100 degrees Celsius is very hot. But hey, if Intel says it's safe, I guess it's safe. Taking a look at the graph again, guys, 8 threads, 16 threads, max threads, and even 4 threads give us those temperatures that we were seeing in games, around 80 to 90 degrees Celsius most of the time, which I consider super safe. So yeah, with all of that said, I found my new editing machine. It's this thing right here. I cannot believe it. For gaming, however, look elsewhere. Intel Xe graphics are not really that great, obviously, as we saw in this video, and the eGPU setup is super unreliable, and it's usually a lot more pricey than just building a desktop PC on your own. Thank you very much for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one very soon. Hope you enjoyed. As always, love you all. Bye-bye.